ChatGPT and other AI models are really good at some things and really bad at other things. And as you probably know, they tend to be quite terrible at chess. They don't actually understand anything about the game of chess. They just know how to talk about it in a way that sounds really convincing. However, one thing that they are really good at is kind of sifting through and digging through information to try to see if there's anything relevant or interesting. And so with that in mind, I've been trying to use ChatGPT lately to help me to analyze my chess games, because Stockfish can easily tell me what moves are correct and what lines are the strongest in a particular position. But Stockfish doesn't really tell me why. I kind of have to dig into it a little bit more in order to figure that out. And so I'm wondering if I can use AI models like ChatGPT or others to give me that missing information about why a certain move is better than another one. And although there are some caveats, I've actually been having a decent amount of success with this. So let me show you what I mean. This is a game I played at Chess Club recently with my friend Harry. You can check out another game with him up there. This one I did not have quite as good of luck with, but that's okay. I was playing with the white pieces, and I have been trying to play the Catalan lately, so we played into this pretty main line. He played this bishop b4 check, and I played bishop d2. As I've mentioned in my Catalan video, which you can check out after this one, I'll leave a link below in the description, the dark squared bishop often ends up being a bit of a problem, or at least not very useful in the Catalan. So when bishop b4 happens, I like to just block with my bishop. And then after the trade, I'm happy with my knight being here anyway, because often, I don't know, if it's going to be a closed Catalan, then I kind of want the knight supporting e4. And then if it's open, then I like it to be able to, you know, grab the pawn on c4 instead. So Harry castles, I bring out my knight. He brings out his knight, castles, and c6. So now this is a typical closed Catalan position, and I'm going to try to play for a fairly quick e4 to try to open things up and try to strengthen this light squared bishop and really kind of put some pressure on black's queen side. So rook e8, and then right away I'm playing e4. And so we make some trades. He brings the other knight, kicking my queen back. I wasn't quite sure where to put the queen here, actually. Maybe d3 would have been better, but I didn't like how then my d-pawn is kind of pinned. And so, you know, I just brought it back. And now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out ways to further open up the board and really bring out the strength of this bishop. And so queen e7, I bring my rook here, maybe looking for tactics against the queen. And Harry's bishop is quite bad, right? It's stuck behind these pawns, all these pawns on light squares, and can't develop very easily. So I bring my knight to e5, thinking that I could trade off for that bishop, although I might not, right? Because that bishop is actually just really bad, and this knight is actually quite nice on this square. And the e5 square does tend to be a pretty good spot for the knight in several different lines of the Catalan. And so now, after rook e d8, this is a key position in this game. And here, I actually played a mistake. So what I was thinking, first of all, I was thinking, do I want to take that bishop? And the answer is no, because with the rook here, after the rook goes up here and maybe rook a d1, and then black brings their other rook, now black is really controlling this semi-open file and putting a lot of pressure on my pawn here. And so we'll go back. I don't want to take that bishop. So what do I want to do in this position? Well, what I did was a mistake. My thought was that I wanted to play d5 because I want to just kind of shred things open in the center of the board. And, you know, opening things up is going to make this bishop even more powerful, right? But it doesn't quite work. And it's not too hard to see why. But let me just back up for a minute, because I kind of looked at it with Stockfish. I wasn't like completely sure what was going on. And so this is a position that I actually put into ChatGPT to see what it would say and whether it had anything interesting to say about it. And it actually did. So let me show you how I did this. So let's see. This is my ChatGPT window, and there's a lot of text here, but I'll kind of run through some of this. So first of all, I told it I was playing white in the following position. I did not find the best moves. I struggle in this kind of position where there isn't really a tactical line that I'm trying to find. I need to come up with a positional idea instead. Help me to understand how to think about this position and how to find the correct move. Obviously, I could use an engine now after the game, but I want to know some strategies or techniques for finding the right move in scenarios like this during games. And then I gave it the full position in the FEN notation, which is standard on Lichess or chess.com. And then I have a local Stockfish app that I let run for a little bit to a depth of like 20 or 21, something like, I guess it says like 23. And I told it to get the top like 10 lines or something like this. And so I said, all right, the top Stockfish lines are as follows. And I pasted it all into the prompt. I just dumped it all in. These are all the Stockfish lines. I wanted to give it as much information as I could. These LLMs, or large language model AIs, tend to work best when you give them lots of information and you ask them for specific things that you want them to do. So then after giving it all of that, I told it some more things. I said, I played d5 in the game, which was a mistake. My idea seemed correct. I wanted to break open the center and make my Catalan bishop stronger. However, for some reason, it doesn't work. I would like to also understand how I can evaluate an idea like that during a game and understand why that doesn't work, and then use that information to figure out the correct idea. And so then I said, so here's the position after I make my move. And again, there's the position and all of the top Stockfish lines. And I think that's it. Yes. So pretty big prompt. But again, I wanted to give it all of the context, all of the information that I want it to use in order to generate a response. And it was pretty interesting. So let's have a look. So first, it kind of started breaking down the position a bit. So what is going on in the position? We have equal material. Both kings are safe. Pawn structure, no immediate weaknesses. Black has potential pawn breaks. Okay, interesting. Piece activity, your knight on e5 is centralized and strong. That is correct. Your light squared bishop is excellent, but could become even stronger if the center opens. Yes, that's true. And that's kind of what I'm sort of looking for in this position, right? I really want to make that bishop even stronger than it is. Black's knight on f6 and light squared bishop are fairly passive. Your rooks are on passive squares and need better posts. Now, this I think is only half right. I think my rook on e1 is actually not that bad, but definitely my rook on a1 is pretty passive, as it said. And this is actually a pretty important piece of the puzzle here. So, okay, Black's knight on f6 and light squared bishop are fairly passive. Again, I think it's only half right. So Black's knight on f6 doesn't look that bad to me. Like, it is controlling some squares in my camp, and it's you know, putting some pressure, putting some control on d5 as well. The light squared bishop, on the other hand, yeah, that is totally passive. It's being blocked in by the pieces. It's quite a bad piece, in fact. And the pawn on c6 limits Black's development a bit. Yes, it does, because it is blocking in this bishop from getting out on that diagonal. So it's not totally correct in a lot of the things that it says, but it's pretty close, and it does have some things right. So let's see how it does. What is your opponent's plan? Well, Black is likely looking for pawn breaks with c5 or e5. I hadn't really thought of that, but that's interesting. Black might want to move the c pawn or the e pawn at some point in the future to try to activate this bishop. That makes a lot of sense. They may also maneuver their knight d7 and knight f8. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I kind of wonder if there's some like obscure set of moves in the Stockfish lines somewhere that where this makes sense, but it doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense to me, so I don't know. And finally, they could try to trade pieces and equalize. This actually kind of makes sense too. I don't know how Black is going to trade pieces, but the fact that Black is kind of cramped and has less space than White means that it would benefit Black to trade off pieces and not be quite so cramped and not give White as much piece play to use in the extra space that White has. So that sounds sensible. So what are your candidate moves and ideas? Your move d5 seems logical at first glance. It opens a position for your pieces and gives your Catalan bishop more scope. However, it helps Black activate their pieces and centralize their knight with knight takes d5 while trading off your active knight. Okay, so I don't know what it's talking about in terms of trading off my active knight. Again, there might be something in a line that I haven't seen. But this was pretty interesting, actually, because during the game and when I was analyzing, there was sort of a line that I missed that this kind of prompted me to look a little more closely at, which is when I push d5, if Black takes with the c pawn and then I recapture, then Black can capture with the knight. And not only does that mean I'm down a pawn, but look what has happened for the piece activity. Yes, I open up my bishop, but Black activates their knight. This knight is on a beautiful square, and Black activates this bishop. So like the bishop was a really terrible piece, and now it's better. So the interesting thing about this position, which I kind of realized after looking at ChatGPT, and I'll show you that there are a few more things that it says as well that have helped with this, but it kind of benefits my position the way that I wanted it to. but it kind of benefits black just as much or maybe even more than it benefits me, actually. So that's pretty interesting. Let's keep going. Okay, instead, let's think of other ideas. Rook activation. And again, this was kind of interesting. Rook AD1, I think that is actually the top engine move in this position. And what ChatGPT is telling me is your rooks are doing nothing and bringing them into the game makes sense. Stockfish suggests Rook AD1 reinforcing the center. This actually gave me two pieces of information that I hadn't thought of. So it makes sense that Rook AD1 would, like, you know, bring the rook into the game, but just kind of reminding me that this rook is not developed yet, that it's still on its home square and it hasn't actually been moved, is a good reminder. And so developing it could be beneficial. Not only that, I guess I'm actually in the wrong position here. If I go back here, this is where I was trying to come up with a move. So developing it makes sense. Not only that, but black has this semi-open D file, right? And so bringing it, and as ChatGPT said somewhere, reinforcing the center, bringing it here and reinforcing this central pawn, especially since black is going to be applying some pressure to it, that makes a lot of sense. It gives me a little more context than just Stockfish saying, well, Rook AD1 makes sense. And in this case, like, I can kind of step through the moves in Stockfish and try to figure it out. But yeah, ChatGPT looked at this position and gave me some reasons, some like higher level, more abstract reasons why this move makes sense. It activates my rook, develops it off of its home square, and reinforces the central pawn. Perfect. That's what I want to hear. And sort of a theme that I'll be coming back to a couple of times is like, and we'll look through this a bit more. Not everything that this says is right. In fact, there's a lot of things that it gets just totally, completely wrong. But there are a few like little bits and pieces of accurate and intelligent and interesting and helpful things that it mentions. So, okay, let's keep going. Rook activation, great. Space expansion. Moves like h4 prevent black from playing h6 and create expansion ideas. I think all of this is a little bit inaccurate. Like h4, I suppose, like maybe h4 prevents h6 and then g5, possibly, but not really. Like that is still kind of possible. And then like a3 prepares b4. Yeah, sure. Okay, so a3 and then b4, because if I just played b4, then the queen would take it, right? But then stops black from expanding with a5. Not really. I guess if I play b4, then maybe that makes it harder. I'm not sure. And then, so another top engine move was c5. So I was interested to see what it would say about c5. And c5 fights for space and blocks black's knight. So again, this is really only half right. Playing c5 doesn't block black's knight from going anywhere, in fact. But it does kind of give me a bit of extra space on the queen side here. And then look at what it says next. Knight maneuvering. Your knight could be rerouted to d6 via c4. Then it says, but that takes time. Leaving it on e5 for now is good. And that's all well and good. But it can see through the Stockfish lines, of course, that moving the pawn to c5 means the knight could go to c4, and then it's threatening to land right here on d6, where there's no, like, that's a beautiful outpost, right? There's no pawn that can kick it. Probably black's best bet is to, move the knight back to e8 in order to prevent my knight from going there, after I've moved the knight to c4 or something like that. And so that's pretty interesting that it was able to kind of glean through those Stockfish lines and give me this sort of positional idea, which I would have had to see back here, right? That pushing c5 allows the knight to, I can't draw arrows, but pushing here allows the knight to kind of reroute to d6. That's very cool. That's very helpful as well. So, okay, let's finish this off. Why is d5 bad? It helps black activate their knight with knight takes d5. Helpful. It exchanges your strong active knight for a knight that was doing nothing. Not helpful. There must be some line. I didn't look through the lines really closely. There must be some line where like the knights get traded after I play d5 or something like that. But I don't know, like that seems, I don't know if it's really a hallucination, but that seems like not as helpful of a thing. Okay, it clarifies the pawn structure in a way that is not necessarily in your favor. Yes, I agree with that, because it activates this knight and it activates this bishop with the clarification and opening in the center. Yes, it helps my bishop, but it helps black a little bit more. So then it gives me a few more things. What should you have played instead? We talked about these moves. Rook AD1, developing your last inactive piece. Space gain with c5. And then h4, I think this is probably the most interesting thing it says about the move h4. It's a useful waiting move. It doesn't really prevent h6. At least I don't see how it prevents h6, but it is a useful waiting move. So that also would have been interesting. And then a3 preventing a5. I don't think that makes any sense. But okay, we're not quite done yet. We're almost there. How to think about such positions in a game. Ask, who benefits from opening the center? That, I think, is a very useful piece of advice, because that would have helped me here. Like, I'm like, all right, I want to open the center because it's going to open up my bishop. But I didn't even think about, does opening the center benefit black? And as I've shown you, it does. And that would have been worth thinking about more during the game. As it says here, opening the center helps black as much as it helps you. Which pieces need improving? Your rooks were doing nothing. Get them to useful squares first. All right. I don't think both of my rooks were doing nothing, but certainly one of them was doing nothing and should have gone to a useful square. And what's my worst placed piece? In this case, the rook on a1 was passive, and activating it would have been logical. That all makes sense. And so final takeaways. And this is interesting. In positions without immediate tactics, look for piece activity and plans instead. I was kind of looking for tactics here. I was looking for tactics, against the queen, if I pushed and things started opening up. But as this says, positions without immediate tactics. And there wasn't an immediate tactic here. I wasn't seeing how it could really work. I think I was just kind of like, let's push the D pawn, open things up, and there may be a tactic. Hopefully there will be a tactic. That's kind of hope chess, right? And it doesn't quite work. So since there wasn't an immediate tactic, looking for piece activity and plans would have made a lot more sense. And so looking for piece activity, again, our eyes are drawn to this rook in the corner that hasn't moved yet. So before making a move that changes the pawn structure, consider who benefits from the structure change. Yep, we've talked about that. And develop your last inactive piece before making structural decisions. So that's pretty interesting, right? I mean, again, it didn't get everything right. There were a lot of things that it got wrong, but there were a lot of helpful things that it said as well. And so that really helped me to get a better understanding of this position and a better understanding of what I did wrong and what I can do better next time, which is exactly what I wanted this to give me. So let's jump back into the game. There's another interesting position coming up. So of course I played d5, we traded here, and then So part of the reason why I didn't immediately know why this plan didn't work is because it kind of worked in the game. Obviously, Harry was also a bit worried about this rook and potential tactics. So he played queen here. I get probably he also didn't want to have an isolated pawn, although he would have been up a pawn, right? So I don't know. Anyway, he played queen here, queen d6. And so I captured, and now I am not down a pawn, which is nice. And in fact, now I'm up a pawn, because since the center opened, I could actually grab this b pawn with a tempo on the rook. And then after my bishop was attacked, this position, again, was a little bit interesting. I was desperately looking for tactics here because I was seeing this nice, juicy c6 square where I could fork the two rooks. But playing knight c6 right away is a blunder. It doesn't work because I actually lose two pieces for the rook. And generally it's better, the two pieces are not really equivalent to a rook and a pawn in this case. So I wanted to prepare doing this. And since the queen ultimately is the one that does that last capture, I was evaluating, and what I ultimately played was finally rook a d1, which is good because, it activates my rook, which is nice. But it doesn't actually mean that this tactic is possible because queen b6 saves the day. And once again, if I move my knight like this, then black can trade rooks first and then just grab this bishop. And again, I've traded my bishop and knight for a rook and a pawn, and that is better for black in this case. So instead, I kind of gave up on that idea. It would have been better way back here after the bishop was attacked, just to move the bishop back and not kind of get into these weird complications, because I'm up a pawn and I can probably stay up a pawn in this position. However, when we get over here, now I finally move my bishop back, and then black has this beautiful queen a5, which hits the rook, and since I've traded a pair of rooks, now the rook isn't being defended by anything, and it also double attacks this pawn. So I end up having to defend the rook, and I lose this pawn. So now material is equal. But okay, the game goes on. Move my knight to attack the bishop. Once again, there's an attack on this rook, so I defend. And then bishop f5. And now here's the other interesting position. I wasn't really sure what to do here. I know that, since we each have pawns over here, if I lose this pawn, basically, then this outside passed pawn is going to be very powerful in an endgame. And so I really don't want to allow that. I'm not sure my Catalan bishop is all that good right now. I suppose it prevents the rook from getting behind this pawn right away, but it's another one of those positions where I don't really know what to do. Stockfish says that this is a draw. This is 0-0 in the evaluation. But then when I open Stockfish, it gives me like a bunch of moves that are all 0-0, and it's hard for me to think about which move might be better or which move accomplishes different things. So I threw this one into ChatGPT as well. Let's have a look. So if I just scroll down a bit here past the one we just went through, I said, okay, new position. And I won't go through this one in quite as much detail, but I'd like to give you sort of the gist of what's going on here. So new position, I wasn't sure what to do in this position, so I got aggressive. So what I did is I played this rook e7 move, and this wasn't losing or anything, but then I kind of had the wrong follow-up, and so I thought maybe this was just an overly aggressive move, and I wanted to see what ChatGPT would say. So I didn't play the right follow-up. How should I think about a position like this? And then again, I give it the position and all of the Stockfish information, and then I'm going to ask a follow-up a little bit later. I won't go through all of this. It does the same kind of thing where it breaks down the position, looks for the opponent's plans. This is kind of interesting. Your opponent might improve piece activity with h6 and then g5. That's kind of interesting. Something I hadn't really thought of in this position. Exchange rooks, maybe not. Pressure weak. Yeah, a lot of this one was actually a little bit less helpful, actually. But it does talk about some candidate moves, and one of them includes the move that I made. And when I looked in Stockfish, yes, indeed, like this move, rook e7, is a move that maintains the 0.0 evaluation. And so it says, you know, the right approach in this position is slow play. Oh yes, there was something important up here. Yeah, one of the slow improvement things it mentioned was h3 or h4. And it says it prevents back rank issues. And down a little bit, I think it says the same kind of thing. Yeah, h3 prevents black's easy counterplay while maintaining flexibility. It's interesting that it saw this because actually back rank issues did end up giving black counterplay in just a few moves. And that's something that was a really key thing in this game. So then I gave it the next position. I said I played rook e7. So that's what I played, which is one of the moves given by Stockfish, but I immediately did the wrong thing. After I played rook e7, black played king f8, so attacking the rook. I seriously cannot draw arrows. There we go. King f8 attacking the rook. And so I gave it all the information for that position, the FEN and all the Stockfish lines. And then I played queen e3, thinking it would support my rook, but for some reason that is winning for black. Help me understand why and what I should have done instead. So yeah, so I played queen e3, and it's a blunder. And so again, I gave it all of the information, and then, you know, digging through Stockfish a little bit might have also shown me this, but it was interesting to see what ChatGPT came up with. So what was your idea? You played queen e3 with the intention of reinforcing the rook on e7. Maybe you also thought of centralizing your queen. Okay, whatever. Why is it losing? Now this is interesting. Black has the brutal queen a1 check, which forces you into a horrible position. After bishop f1, rook d1, your position collapses. So that is what happened in the game. Black immediately played queen a1 with a check, but I thought this was probably okay because I could put my bishop on f1 and then just defend everything, right? So I did that. Now the rook came down as well, and then I played the queen here defending the bishop. And I thought, okay, this is fine. And it ended up being fine in the game because there was actually a tactical line here that Harry also missed, which was almost given by ChatGPT. So it says, the move rook takes f7 check leads to a forced sequence where you lose control and black dominates. Rook takes f7 check. What? Well, I think it just got a number wrong somehow because the move is rook takes f1 check because black takes the bishop, right? And then when I recapture and then we trade queens, now black also gets my rook, and I am just down a bishop. And so, again, Stockfish had this, and I could have seen this in Stockfish, but it was kind of ChatGPT using this strong language saying that my position is horrible, my position is collapsing, there's a forced sequence where I lose control. That kind of prompted me to look a little deeper at this line, you know, after, where am I? After... in this position, right? Like, is there something more forcing here? And so I looked, because I was just looking at, like, you know, back here, Stockfish was saying like, yeah, this was a blunder. And I'm like, why is this a blunder? But then, you know, this kind of led me to say, well, all right, let's go a few moves later and then see what this really good forcing sequence is for black that just completely loses the game for me, right? And that was very interesting. So again, ChatGPT didn't necessarily give me like exactly 100% accurately what was going on, but it really kind of pushed me and nudged me toward looking more closely at the critical line here. And so we can see this is really cool. It says, the key mistake: you underestimated how dangerous black's counterplay can be. Your queen moved to a worse square. So let's go back here. In this position, your queen moved to a worse square instead of a useful square. And that is totally true. That, like, ChatGPT nailed it. I exactly underestimated how dangerous all of this counterplay on the back rank was going to be. That's exactly the mistake I made. And it figured that out, and it told me that. And I think that's really cool. And it was actually really helpful for me in trying to understand this position. So, okay, let's see. How should you have played instead? This isn't quite as important. Like, there are other rook moves that work. Some of the things it mentions are not that useful. It mentions h3 again, a quiet move that prevents back rank problems, so that could have helped. And then b4, this is just kind of a funny little tactic. Like, whoops. Oh my goodness. Okay, if we're back here, instead of queen e3, you know, the king is attacking the rook, but I could play b4, which is attacking the queen, and then after takes, I can take over here, and it just kind of gets rid of those pawns. Kind of an interesting line, not something I think I would have found, and I'm okay with that. So again, it's talking about how queen e3 didn't stop black's counterplay. If you don't have an immediate attack, improve your worst piece. Yeah, well, that's not. I mean, it says, you know, the rook is my worst piece, and rook b7 would have been more active than queen e3. Well, yeah, because the rook is under attack. So again, it's not completely right. But again, does my opponent, like looking down here and how to apply this to future games, does my opponent have a check or counterplay after my move? And so looking for checks and captures and threats and those sorts of things is, you know, very important. And it's nice to have this reminder that, you know, looking for a check can be a good way to find counterplay that my opponent has that I might have otherwise overlooked. All right, so let's continue on. We're almost done here. The game only went on for a few more moves. Again, we had all of this counterplay here. Black played here, which was a blunder, but it looks nice because it hits the rook. And so we kind of maneuvered around a bit. At this point, I was feeling like, okay, I need to push for a draw here. So I'm trying to, you know, trade off the rooks and you know, ease some of this tension. And the rook hits my queen, and I move the queen out here, which was an inaccuracy. We're going to come back to this in just a minute. But then, you know, we maneuver around a little bit more. And in this position, we actually just agreed to a draw because we were playing this at chess club. It was starting to get late. We were a little bit over time. We wanted to close up and get out of there. So we agreed to a draw. But like, black can probably still win. Like, if anyone is playing for a win in this position, it's black. But it was pretty interesting. But let me just go back to one more thing. I'm not gonna take quite as much time in this position, but I thought this was pretty interesting to show you. This is an inaccuracy, and it's not super clear why this is an inaccuracy. And Stockfish says that the right move is this instead, queen c4 instead of queen b5. And so I thought I'd throw this into ChatGPT also. And this is a great example of where ChatGPT completely failed. Like, it started telling me that, like, I don't know, something was getting more active and so on. Like, I asked it specifically, like, hey, doesn't this just like lose a pawn, like just blunder a pawn? That's why I played this, right? So that I could defend that pawn. And it was saying like, yeah, but it's like a positional sacrifice because you get better activity for your pieces and this and that and so on. And I was just like, I am not understanding this at all. Like, how is this better? And so what I actually needed to do was sort of actually work through this in Stockfish. And I found that, you know, after this move, black takes, then I have a fork, right? It's not as good as it looks because black can just trade here, but I have a fork that black has to deal with. And so after trading, then black has a fork, forking my queen. I move the king, we take. And now this is key. At the very end of that whole sequence, I move the rook over here and I am attacking this pawn. And I'm going to win this pawn. There's no way for black to defend this pawn, right? And so this endgame, I don't know, I think black is still a bit better, but it, you know, is probably looking pretty drawish. Now, let's go all the way back and let's see if instead of queen c4, what if I play queen b5 instead? Well, now black has this amazing move, Sorry, that's not the amazing move. That's what happened in the game. Black has this amazing move, A6. And A6 is fascinating. And when I saw it in the engine, I'm like, well, what does A6 even do? Like that doesn't seem like it really does anything. Basically, it forces my queen to go back to C4 anyway. And I'm like, okay, well then why doesn't this whole sequence that I just looked at still work? And we can do this whole sequence, once again, all the same moves, except now, at the very end, when I move this rook over, this pawn is on a light square, and black can defend it. So I don't actually win this pawn anymore. And that, like, there's also a bunch of other lines, of course, that the Stockfish was going into, and there are some moves in the different variations that it doesn't like. But this is the kind of thing where I actually had to, like, dig through it myself and try to look and understand, like, these lines and what the difference ended up being. This is not something that ChatGPT found. Now, this is where, like, I've been experimenting with it quite a bit, and I've been sort of thinking that, you know, I'm a software developer. I do some of that. And so I might actually try to make sort of a more intelligent kind of bot, which can kind of link up in real time Stockfish and something like ChatGPT. Because my idea is that ChatGPT, as long as it has all the right information, it can tell me useful things. And if it could, like, communicate with Stockfish to get sort of all the correct and accurate ideas and piece placement and what's attacking what and all of that sort of stuff in real time, and maybe explore some lines like this one and kind of dig all the way down through, then I don't know, maybe it could find something like this, and maybe it would reduce sort of the amount of inaccuracies and mistakes that it makes as well, by kind of trying to give it a better understanding of how the position actually works and what moves are legal and what things are actually going on the board. Kind of try to infuse it with a bit more chess-specific intelligence. So I don't know, it's been interesting to kind of play around with. It's interesting to think about. Definitely leave a comment if you think a tool like that would be, you know, helpful for you in your own game analysis, because I think it would be pretty helpful. So let me know what you think, and also let me know if you've had any luck yourself kind of trying to do this sort of thing, like this sort of game analysis using ChatGPT or Claude or one of the other ones. And so let me just quickly recap sort of the lessons from this game, because I think they're pretty good lessons. First of all, in this position, move 16, where I played this, I think the key lesson is, like, when you're going to change the structure or open the center or whatever, take a look and see, okay, does this benefit me more, or does this benefit, you know, my opponent more, right? Like in this case, yes, it was beneficial to me because it opened up this bishop, but it actually was better for black because it activated the knight and it activated the bishop and all of that sort of stuff. So that's a useful question to ask. And then let's see, on move 27, let me just find it here, this one. Basically, the lesson here is always look for counterplay, right? In a position like this, you know, it looks like the back rank is fine because it's not like I have 3 pawns here. I have like a bishop and it can jump in front of the king and block things. But there's still counterplay along the back rank, especially when the queen and the rook both come down. And so moving my queen off of the back rank, now that the rook is also off of the back rank, opens up this very strong counterplay. And this counterplay was even a move that came with check, which you should always be looking for, right? Look for whether there are any checks, captures, or threats that are going to kind of force you to have to do anything. And so in this case, yeah, the counterplay was really strong, and it would have been better if I had kind of looked for that. And so yeah, finally, I hope that this was helpful and interesting for you. I hope it was interesting to see how these AI chatbots can kind of be used to help you with chess. You got to give them the right information. You have to kind of structure your prompt the right way. And I'm going to be still kind of playing around with this and seeing if I can make it work even better. But it's already shown a bit of promise, right? Like it's kind of interesting to see how it thinks through things. And again, a lot of the things it says are not accurate or completely incorrect, but there are a few interesting sort of nuggets of information that it gives that I've actually found really helpful. So I hope this was interesting for you. Again, leave a comment to let me know what you think, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one.